Part 19 of 25. He used to tell me stories from Good Little Boys Go to Heaven by Stukin. Fall 1962, East Texas, from Joey. He used to tell me stories. Sometimes I looked to my mama and she would seem amused, other times annoyed, other times disbelieving. He would give me his version of his family's history. I just liked listening to him talk. I was just a small boy who really couldn't understand what he said. Still, I liked listening to him talk. He'd get so excited, which would make my heart quicken. He'd get so sad, which would make my heart heavy. Sometimes he seemed unsure, which made me confused. I knew what he said had a great deal of meaning to him, but I couldn't understand. From Joseph. I knew the boy couldn't understand much of what I was saying. However, I wasn't really talking to him. I was trying to communicate with his mama through him. I never could talk directly to her, or she wouldn't hear directly from me. Sometimes maybe I wasn't talking to either of them. I was talking to myself. I'd start talking, and sometimes I would say things I couldn't fully comprehend. Does that make sense? I tried to explain my family's history to him. I tried to explain it to myself. I tried to explain to him how our people had come to that point in time with things being the way they were for us. Some of what I said was true. Some of it, some of it was not. I was trying to make his mama understand our situation. I was trying to make her understand me. I was trying to understand myself. We were so young, me in my mid-20s, her about the same. I don't imagine any of the three of us understood anything. But talk I did. I liked to hear myself talk, and neither of them ever had much to say to me. Joey. For a while, I enjoyed the Civil War stories most of all. We started this thing, him and me, where we would imitate the rebel soldiers answering the battle cry. Charge, we would yell while rushing towards my mama. She would get annoyed. I thought it was the noise and rowdy play. She held her tongue for a while, but she grew tired of our answering the cry. Eventually, one day after my father had gone, she asked me, "Why is you playing like that? Don't you have no good sense?" I said, I don't know if I got any good sense or not. You need to find some, or at least try to act like you got some and stop that foolishness. From then on, I stopped answering the battle cry. My father tried once to start again, but I told him I'd found my sense and I couldn't answer the call anymore. Joseph. I used to repeat the Civil War stories I had learned in school to him. I told him how the Confederate soldiers had fought so valiantly to repel the invading forces from the North. I mostly told made-up stories of my forebears who had fought in the war, men whose bravery was equaled only by their love for their homeland, the Confederacy. I showed him how a good soldier answered the battle cry. When the bugle was sounded and the charge was given, every man rose to his feet, his heart trying to pound its way out of his chest, his hearing gone from the blood rushing through his head, his mouth open with a voice bellowing as if sent by God. They fought the good fight, but were defeated by much larger, better armed forces. Once I started singing the chorus to Dixie, he just screwed up his face and laughed. Truth be told, I wasn't sure what my people did during the Civil War. My father never talked to me about anything, and my mother had made a break with her past. My family's only real history in the Civil War was the one I made up. Most likely in keeping with the family's business since the end of the war, we probably financed it, and likely both sides. Joey. My mama didn't care about the Civil War stories. She said to me later when I was trying to repeat all the stories to her, all war is men dying over nothing. There ain't nothing for us in no war. You need to leave them stories alone. Joseph. He asked me if I'd ever killed anyone. At first, I thought I'd misheard the question. I asked him what he had said. How many men have you killed? My mama told me that all war meant was men killing other men. I thought long and hard about how to answer his questions. It's true some men fight just because they like to fight. Some kill just because they like to kill. Some get killed just because they want to get killed. I know that makes some folks sound so mindless, but mindless is the best way to describe some folks. That isn't the way most folks are, though. Most folks fight for their beliefs and their principles. Most people hate fighting, but sometimes they can see no other way. My folks never hated anyone. Still, they took up arms and fought when they felt they had no other choice. They weren't fighting men, it was ideas they were fighting. He sat there quietly listening. I'm not sure if he truly understood what I was saying. I'm not sure if he was contemplating my words. I'm not sure if he accepted my statements as the truth. That's what's most important to every parent, to think, to believe that their children accept what they are told as the truth. Most children eventually do. In the end, they accept the corrupted values, the amoral morality, distorted self-serving history, and the superstitions of the religions their predecessors, because it's easier than attempting to make sense of the world with their own minds. We believe in things we will never see, hear, or touch. Still, the most important thing to every parent is that their children believe in them. Joey, after the dog I had, the dog he got for me, died. He wanted to buy me another dog. All I remember is how he fretted over my loss. I couldn't bring myself to talk to him about what had happened. I cried. I ran to my mama and hid behind her. He asked her what was going on. As was her way with him, she shook her head and wouldn't say anything to him. After he had left, she sat me down to talk to me. She explained to me what our being colored meant. She said we were born to suffer. She said suffering was good, though. She said it made us strong. She said we had to suffer to get into heaven. She said every truly good little boy suffered in some way. And she said good little boys all go to heaven. I didn't like suffering. I was 8 years old and I didn't want to suffer. But my mother ensured suffering was my constant companion. No, that isn't fair to her. It isn't fair to me. But I could never escape her unhappiness. Joseph. He asked me if I had ever suffered. I asked him what he knew about suffering. He repeated what his mother had told him. Colored folks were born to suffer. My first thought was to tell him that wasn't true. I knew he'd go with what his mama told him over what I told him. I had learned she had a lot more influence over him than what I did. He'd often ask me about things she had said to him, I guess hoping I'd offer some plausible alternative. Still, he came to believe as she did about everything. I told him suffering wasn't a colored thing, it was a human thing. We come into this world crying, and some of us spend our entire lives crying. Regardless of race, we all lose folks we don't want to lose. There are so many other losses we suffer. There's so many other ways to suffer. I wanted to tell him of my losses. I wanted to share with him the suffering I have lived through. It would have been like talking to the wall, though. He wouldn't have understood, and he didn't deserve to have to carry any part of my miseries. Joey. He told me about the losses he had suffered. He told me about his brother Jack. This is the story as best I can remember it. My brother Jack and I used to love to go swimming over at the river. Then there was a problem between the two of us, and I stopped going with Jack. One night, my brother Jack went out alone and never came back alive. Some boys found him floating down the river away from where we used to go fishing. I started to cry while he was telling me the story. Losing a dog was bad enough. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to lose a brother. He rubbed my head and told me I shouldn't cry. He said his brother was in a better place now. He said his brother had a tough time there on earth, but he was in the lap of Jesus and was better off now than he had ever been on earth. He offered to take me to the river and show me where his brother's body was found. Why would I want to see that? I asked myself. Joseph. I did tell him about my brother Jack, though. The only truth I told him was that Jack had drowned and that he was found downriver. I don't really remember what happened to Jack that night at the river. I remember being there, and I remember my boy's mama being there. I've pretty much succeeded in putting the rest of it out of my mind. I made Jack and me out to be close. I made him out to be far different from the villain he had always seemed to me in life. I couldn't even look at Joey as I was telling this. I sat hunched over, watching my hands trying to wring themselves dry. I looked up to his mother a couple of times. My eyes quickly returned to my hands. The disbelief on her face did nothing to slow the stream of words from my mouth. I wish I'd never started telling him about Jack, but I couldn't stop once I started. Even with almost none of what I was saying being true, I couldn't stop. When he started crying, I wanted to start crying as well. I didn't, though. I didn't know what else to say. Fortunately, his mama took over and led him out of the room. After she had put him to bed, all his mama had to say to me was, "You shouldn't lie to that boy." I nodded my head in agreement. What could I have told him? I realized I should never have mentioned Jack's name to him. I never talked to anyone about my brother again. Joey. After he had gone, my mama told me, you needs to forget about that nonsense he told you about his brother. I got no doubt that he has suffered. All men suffer, white men included, but he never suffered over his brother's death. I asked her what she meant. She said, he and his brother weren't close, and they barely seemed to know each other. They was nothing alike, and you would never have known they was brothers if you weren't told. It seemed to me that my mama had known his brother. Did you know his brother, Mama? I didn't know him, but your father talked to me about him, son. Your father talked to me about him too much. That was my mama's way. She'd sit there most of the time listening to his stories with me. She wouldn't say a word. Sometimes she'd make some sort of gesture or cover my ears. Then after my father would leave, she'd contradict almost every word that came out of his mouth. I wasn't sure what to think of him. I wasn't sure what to think of her. More than a decade later, I'm not sure what to think about either of them. Joseph. I told him how my mama's folk had founded this country. I told how they come and made peace with the Indians instead of killing them. They bartered for the land instead of stealing it. We once owned one of the largest plantations in the state, grew more cotton than you can imagine, acre after acre of the finest grade of cotton. We'd long given up farming when I came around, though. We still own the county's largest bank, the largest automobile dealership, and several other businesses in town. The way I described my family, we must have seemed like kings to him. Joey. He said his family owned all of the county. He told me about all his family had brought to the county: automobiles, a cotton gin, the first bank, the first Baptist church, the first colored Baptist church. I wondered if he had so much. Why did my mama and I have so little? My mama later commented that his family had probably brought the first slaves into the county as well. I didn't understand the idea of slavery, of one man owning another, but I didn't understand the idea of the value of being free either. Joseph. He asked me if my family ever owned slaves. I lied and said no. I looked over to his mama to find her staring at me. This was her way. She never disagreed with anything I said to my face. From my talks with the boy, I could tell that it was just the two of them, she disagreed with quite a bit of what I said. I didn't want to talk about slavery. We were long past slavery. Slavery no longer has any relevance in our lives. I lied and said no. My family had never owned slaves. We worked our own land. We sowed and reaped every ounce of cotton ourselves. I knew when he got older, he'd easily be able to figure out the truth. Still, it was better to lie to a boy his age than to tell him a horrible truth that really didn't matter anymore. It wasn't me, anyway. I was beyond that. I feared that his mama would contradict what I told him. I put him to bed and then tried to talk to her. I told her it was best for the boy if he believed his father's family was nothing but good people. I told her I would never even think about contradicting anything she told me about her family. She commented I didn't know anything about her family. It occurred to me that she resented my making my family out to be so much more than her family was. She didn't have a family, at least none that she knew. Like most of the coloreds here in the county, most of her family had left for big cities years before. I asked her not to say bad things to the boy about my family and me. She looked me straight in the eyes and nodded her head. Joey, I could tell he wasn't telling me the truth when he said his family, our family, never owned slaves. My mama's reaction made it clear that she didn't believe him. Also, he looked away from me. Usually he'd sit and look me straight in the eye. He looked away and told me that his family had never owned slaves. I wouldn't have held it against him if he'd been honest with me. I wouldn't have blamed him for what his folks, long since dead, had done. Joseph. He asked about my mother, where she lived, and if he would ever meet her. I told him that my mother and I no longer spoke. I didn't tell him I blamed my mother for everything wrong with my life. I didn't tell him I wouldn't take responsibility for my own life. I told him I wasn't sure what happened between my mama and me. I told him we just stopped speaking one day. I didn't know if we'd ever speak again. It was convenient to blame my mama for my life. The whole world is too big to blame, and I was too small to take the blame myself. It was a perfect sized blame for my mother to bear. Joey. He said his mama and him, and he just stopped talking. I couldn't understand how people who should be close just came to stop talking. I sat there for what must have been an hour, waiting for him to continue with the story of what happened between his mama and him. He never continued it. He just sat quietly, trying to find the words, or maybe trying to lose them. Joseph. Things changed. It seemed that overnight he'd no longer sit and listen to my stories. Just like what happened with my mama and me, my boy and I just stopped talking. I'd rejected my mother, the boy had rejected me. I spent many hours trying to figure out what caused him to lose his affection for me. I still don't have any idea of what happened. Joey. My mama told me my daddy no longer cared about us. She was hysterical. She said he had another family and she and I no longer mattered to him. None of what she said made sense to me because he still came by. Her attitude towards him changed so dramatically that mine changed as well. I didn't understand what he had done to us. I didn't understand what it meant for him to have another family. I became so uncomfortable being around him that I couldn't even look at him. He'd walk through the door and I'd quickly take my leave, and then he stopped coming by. I had wished for it for so long, but still, it was difficult for him not to come by. It was more about me being denied the right to reject him every time he came by. I missed his stories. Even when I couldn't stand to be around him, I missed him telling me stories. He was the only person who ever really told me stories. My mama told me a few stories about her life in Dallas and a few about her grandma, but her stories were short. There wasn't much to them. I'm not sure if it was her memory that wasn't very detailed or if her life hadn't been very detailed. Digging up old folks, that's how my mama used to describe the stories about her past. Just let the dead stay buried, she'd say. How was I ever to know who I was or where I had come from? I was nobody who came from nowhere. God, I came to hate her. Maybe I really hated myself. No, I didn't hate her. But she was an anchor around my neck. It's a shameful thing for me to say, but I was drowning, and every time I tried to lift my head above the water, the level seemed to rise. I stopped listening to her, stopped hearing her. From around the time I was 6 or 7 until I met Emily when I was 14, I can't remember saying a word to anyone. I can't remember anyone saying a word to me. I know there were words passed between my mama and me, but I don't want to remember anything she said to me. She was unhappy, and her words were unhappy, and I was lost. I no longer hear my father's voice in my head, in my memory, telling me stories. I am alone, but I am trying. What's done is done. I understand that. What will be done is what should be focused on, and I understand that as well. And I do remember his stories, even though his voice has been lost. That's it.